So I stumbled across this article here on lastwordonhockey.com, and what it pretty much goes over is the idea on whether or not the Montreal Canadiens should go after Corey Crawford. Yeah, this is an interesting idea over here, and it was perpetrated forward a little bit more because I did see some people on Twitter and a lot of people on Reddit actually talking about this idea over here and this article in particular. So because it's an interesting thing to talk about, I decided to take my stab at this little idea over here and go over the idea of Corey Crawford coming to Montreal. Now, the writer of the article, Colton Osmond, I'm going to be honest, he does a pretty good job at selling his pitch to the reader. He goes over the Montreal Canadiens and their backup goaltending situation and how there never has really been a solidified backup in Montreal since 2014, pretty much. We've had guys coming in and out, rotating as that backup position, but for the most part, Montreal has just been Carey Price and whoever else happens to be on the team at the time. There never really is an established number two, just a rotation of many other players. At the moment, it seems like it's Charlie Lindgren who is going to be that backup, but this article proposes an idea to change that status quo. Corey Crawford is the answer here, and what the article proposes is the idea that Corey Crawford, who is in a position where he is an expiring UFA, should be the number one target. Now, Lego, what are you talking about? There's no way the Chicago Blackhawks are going to let Corey Crawford of all people go, right? Well, hold your horses, because if you've been following Blackhawks rumors for the past little bit, you would kind of sense the idea that Corey Crawford going to free agency honestly is a little bit more plausible than one might initially think. There's a lot of speculation as to whether or not the 36-year-old Corey Crawford is actually going to re-sign in Chicago, or if the Blackhawks would actually want to carry forward with him as their number one goaltender. There are other goalies in the market who could be free agents and who could, in most aspects, be better than Crawford. Guys like Robin Lehner are going to be free. Jacob Markstrom might be free, hopefully he's not, but he might be, and there are a few other guys as well, like, for example, Braden Holtby from the Washington Capitals. The Blackhawks, with the money that they have tied up into players on their organization and the need to sign RFAs, there isn't really the room to go out there and keep a Corey Crawford, which is why he's in a position where people are saying, yeah, this guy's probably going to go to free agency. Enter the Montreal Canadiens, a team that we've chronicled over the past few months, talking about how they indeed have cap space and how they indeed have the opportunity to sign free agents if they wanted to. Corey Crawford is the one being proposed here because on a Montreal squad that doesn't have a solidified backup, maybe you can find that in a player like Corey Crawford, who did post up a pretty nice .277 goals against average and a very, very nice .917 save percentage this past season. The only questions are, hey, would Corey Crawford want to come to Montreal? And secondly, would Corey Crawford be okay playing behind a Carey Price? Firstly, though, covering the topic of desire, Corey Crawford is literally from Montreal. He's a guy from Quebec, so when it comes to being a guy who would want to sign in Quebec, to me, there is an incentive to say, yeah, I wouldn't really be surprised if this guy wanted to come to the Habs because he's literally grown up here, so yeah. But the more important argument goes over whether or not he would want to play as a backup. Now, over to this point, the article here over on lastwordonhockey.com goes over what Corey Crawford said in an article published by the Chicago Tribune. Crawford says that he is a competitive guy and he feels like he could still make a difference on a team and to make a run at a championship. That's where his head is at. He never really had a role of sitting on the bench and being a part of that situation, so he doesn't really know if that's actually going to be plausible in the future later on. So, pretty much, we don't really know, and the article ultimately concludes this as well, that we don't necessarily know if Corey Crawford would be willing to stay in a backup scenario with the Montreal Canadiens of all teams, but if he wants to make an impact, he certainly can do that if he is the backup in Montreal. Montreal hasn't had a really good backup in a while, and all the ones that they have had haven't been good to the point where they can actually lessen the load on Price. Price is still over here getting played up to 50, 60 games in a year, and if you're a Montreal Canadiens team that wants to let Carey Price rest and that wants to get the best out of your team every single night, then having a backup goalie could help out. If a guy like Corey Crawford is willing to come over to Montreal, this is a gift because you're going to be able to actually have reliable backup goaltending and you wouldn't need to rely on Price all too much. Now, I get it, Price is one of the top paid goalies in the league. You pay the guy to be the guy that you can rely on every single night, but fact of the matter is, that's just not how it works out nowadays, especially with the way Price goes up and down in how he plays. Another really interesting thing that I didn't consider that this article brings up is the expansion draft. And he talks about how the Montreal Canadiens only have one goaltender signed to the point where the expansion draft will actually happen, and that's Carey Price. The Montreal Canadiens would be able to sign another goaltender to a multi-year deal to allow that player to be exposed in the expansion draft. Whether that's Vasily Demchenko or Michael McNiven, if they get an extension, then all of a sudden there's some extra security on the goaltending side of things if you're a new experienced goaltender coming into the organization. So that's something that I actually didn't consider, but the article wrote about and I thought was really interesting, so I thought I would bring it up here. On top of this, add the leadership, add the experience that a Corey Crawford provides, and all of a sudden you have your pitch. But that's all this is. It's a pitch. It's a writer on lastwordonhockey.com saying, you know, this is what I think. I think Corey Crawford would be a great ad for the Montreal Canadiens. Even titles the article, why Crawford should be the top priority for the Canadiens. But all this article is doing is telling you why he thinks he is right. So, I've presented some information here in this video. Read the article in the description down below. I highly recommend it. It's a very good read. Even if you don't agree with what the writer is saying, I do believe there is value in taking a look at the perspective here. And comment down below what you think about Corey Crawford and Montreal. As for my own personal opinion, I don't think the Canadiens need another goaltender, but they could certainly use one if a goaltender is willing to come over here. Sure, Demchenko is a guy that you sign most likely not to be the backup. We already talked about this, but Demchenko to me is a guy that you sign to give Caden Primo some competition and to actually make things a little bit more competitive down there in Laval. Charlie Lindgren is on pace to becoming that backup goaltender, but if you sign another guy who is, for all intents and purposes, better than a Charlie Lindgren, let's just say like a Corey Crawford, then all of a sudden you are opening yourself up to a little bit more flexibility with the way you want to run your hockey team. Furthermore, a guy like Corey Crawford would legitimately be the best backup goalie the Montreal Canadiens have had since Peter Budaj in 2014. Every other person has been swapping out, and we haven't really had any stability on the backup side of things. Keith Kincaid? No, that didn't work out. Dustin Tokarski? No, I think we all kind of know how that played out. So, if the Montreal Canadiens are looking towards building that team that can be really stable defensively night in and night out, it can, in some reality, come on the shoulders of both Carey Price and Corey Crawford. And this idea was so interesting to me that it's why it was brought up on Reddit, it was brought up on Twitter. I saw people talking about this quite a lot, so that's why I decided to make this video here today, because I legitimately do see where they're coming from. I do see the idea and how this could help out. I just don't necessarily know if that's actually going to happen, nor if the Montreal Canadiens are even really willing to sign another goalie. We'll see, though, as the free agency period comes and goes. Whether or not Corey Crawford even re-signs with the Chicago Blackhawks is yet to be seen, but for now, comment down below what you think about this idea. Should the Montreal Canadiens go after Corey Crawford? I hope you enjoyed this video. Search that Trolls99, and bye.